The second question on the chapter discussion was I asked you about developments in European society before about 1590. This may not seem relevant, but it's important to understand where the Europeans were coming from, what was going on in their society, which explains their sudden interest in these long-distance voyages, which led to the discovery of the Americas. An important part of background is the Black Death, a devastating plague that occurred in Europe in the mid-14th century. This killed about one-third of the population, devastated the economy, and the bounce back from that, the growth of the economy after the Black Death, is an important part of European society before they encounter the Americas. Following the Black Death, we see what are sometimes nicknamed the two R's, the Renaissance and the Reformation. The Renaissance, which literally means a new birth, meaning Europeans were making, were rather rediscovering ancient texts from the Greek and Roman times, which led to a kind of a new sense of inquiry, a new sense of inquisitiveness about the world around them, which made them think in different ways, which made them think, for example, in the case of Columbus, let's go to China westward, sailing across the Atlantic Ocean. Now, the textbook tends to exaggerate a little bit the extent of the newness of the Renaissance. People in the Middle Ages, the period before the Renaissance, they did study texts. They had universities. In fact, they invented the university. They did study the liberal arts, etc. But in the Renaissance, new methods of thinking meant that people challenged traditional medieval ways of looking at the world and looking at their knowledge of the past. The second of the two R's, the Reformation. In medieval Europe, the Catholic Church was dominant. It was the only acceptable church. Being non-Catholic could be difficult, indeed dangerous on occasions. The Reformation was a challenge to the Catholic Church, the creation of what we today call Protestant churches, which broke away from the Catholic Church. This in some ways is an indication of the new ways of thinking of the Renaissance era. It's also important for us because later on, when we get to the colonial era in American history, we see how Britain and Spain were in competition, and that competition for resources was given an added edge by the fact that Spain was Catholic, in fact the biggest Catholic power, and England, or Britain as we later call it, was Protestant. So on top of commercial competition for power, there's also a sense that they were fighting a religious war. The economy is also important in understanding Europe before the encounter with the Americas. The European economy was redeveloping, was growing after the Black Death. Trade routes were being re-established. Long-distance trade with Asia, in particular, was important for our purposes because Europeans got goods like silk and spice from East Asia, which were highly valuable. And the Portuguese explorers who travelled around Africa, and Spanish explorers, most notably Columbus, who were looking for a westward voyage to let's stick with the word voyage, westward route to Asia, wanted to access that wealth. Not because they couldn't get there, but because it was expensive. They had to go through middlemen, notably the Ottoman Empire based on Turkey, which charged for access to the East Asian trade routes, and also was a Muslim empire. In an age when Europeans were very conscious of their religious identity, Muslims were seen as the enemy, and Christians did not want to pay extra. They certainly did not want the profits to go to the hated Muslim enemy.